Hey, Ma, see new Zelda on Nintendo? I want new Zelda on Nintendo. Gotta have new Zelda on Nintendo. Zelda.
Oh, you silly boy. You don't have Nintendo, and that's not gonna work on your turbo machine. We'll get you something else.
But Ma, look at new Zelda. It's so pretty, so cool. Look at the monsters, that action. That luscious pink fro. I gotta have Zelda. What Zelda? Zelda.
Oh, honey, we already have Zelda at home.
Zelda at home.
What the f?
Well, let's be fair here. There's nothing technically wrong with being Zelda at home unless you're doing it really, really badly. But fortunately, we have nothing to worry about in that front, for today's subject matter is Neutopia. Released in 1990 for the TurboGrafx-16, and I don't think there's any real shame in calling this a Legend of Zelda tribute act. It's not like Neutopia is making any real effort to hide that fact. I mean, come on. Princess is kidnapped, you need to seek out 8 magical gimmicks, hidden dungeons, potions that stack up to 2, dungeon layouts are similar, push-block puzzles, step ladders. Granted, there are some differences to the formula, some for the better, others not so much. But it's safe to say that if you've played the original Zelda on Nintendo, then Neutopia is pretty much old hat. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're going to rip something off, at least do it right and all is forgiven. The hero of our story is a young boy named Giuseppe. Yes, a named protagonist who is addressed as such. Charged with seeking out the 8 medallions that will restore peace to the land as well as grant you access to the final castle ruled by the evil Dirth, who holds the princess captive. From there, it's a similar romp to Zelda. You roam around the overworld, you kill monsters for gold and other items like bombs, life-restoring cherries, or other things of that nature. You seek out caves and stairs to visit other citizens who will either give you some tips or sell you some wares such as bombs or potions. Some will even give you special items required for your journey, such as this fire wand thing that will completely make the sword worthless, up to a point that is. And of course, you're seeking out the dungeons that houses the medallions and bosses that are key to completing your quest. As you do a bit of traveling, however, you eventually realize that this overworld map isn't quite as expansive as Zelda's. In fact, once you explore this whole thing, you'll discover there's only 2 dungeons in this overworld. While Neutopia operates a bit differently in that the 8 dungeons are situated across 4 overworlds, or spheres as the game refers to them. You begin in a typical overworld grass setting, and as you gain more medallions, you'll enable access to these other spheres that takes place in different realms, such as a subterranean lair, an aquatic setting, and a sky realm. This gives Neutopia a strict linearity in its progress. There's very little in the way of actual open-endedness and freedom to break from the typical cycle, whatever that entails. The dungeons, or labyrinths as they're called, are laid out in a similar fashion to the Zelda 1 dungeons. You're navigating these network of rooms, killing monsters, using push blocks to open doors, bombing walls to seek out hidden passages, that sort of thing. Labyrinths usually contain 3 items: an upgrade to your equipment, whether it be new armor, a new shield, or a new sword, a crystal ball which acts as a map and displays the entire dungeon layout, and a boss key, which you'll need to unlock the door leading to the boss's lair, a concept that would later appear in A Link to the Past on Super Nintendo a year later, so we're not just copying homework here. It's worth noting that once you begin a dungeon, you cannot just do stuff and move on to another dungeon, because if you do, your progress in the previous dungeon when you come back is somehow reset back to its original state, meaning you'll have to restart the whole thing from scratch. Usually in Zelda, you could do whatever damage you want in one dungeon, go somewhere else for a bit, and then go back to the previous dungeon in the state you left it. Any doors unlocked, any walls bombed, any major enemies killed off will remain in that state. That's not the case here. Actually, Neutopia has an annoying quirk where all the entrances you've bombed or burned away are sealed right back afterwards. In Zelda, you bomb a hidden cave to reveal it, or you burn a tree, it stays open for the rest of the game. Well, I guess door repair comes easily in Neutopia because any new openings are immediately closed off as soon as you leave the screen, which messes with you in terms of keeping track of which caves to explore, i.e. most of them are hints and not worth it, as well as the rare backtracking you will do for cheaper wares, since Neutopia is one of those games where items get more expensive as you progress through the game, so clearly they're playing from the Nurse Nancy playbook of price gouging. Nobody's going to get that. Neutopia is an interesting piece of business. It copies the basic tenets of Zelda's gameplay, but lacks the depth that made Zelda more rewarding. Obviously, there's the non-linear except not really progression that you have to go through, but you also have a fairly limited inventory of items to help you out. The obvious thing is equipment upgrades, coming across stronger shields, swords, and armors. You also have healing items such as cherries and life potions, as well as the usual life extensions. And there are other items like Wings of Return, which will warp you back to your last save point whenever you're in a bind, bombs that blow up walls and cave entrances, something called Moonbeam Moss to illuminate some pretty dark rooms, and eventually you'll come across a Fire Wand, whose attack varies depending on how much life you possess at the moment, but is enough of an efficient weapon that it more or less replaces your sword as a go-to weapon. Case in point, the wand fires in 8 directions while your sword is only limited to 4. And that's all you've got to work with. There are side items as well, a rainbow drop that acts as a stepladder, falcon shoes to increase your walking speed, a book that lets you save your progress via password or backup save. Why yes, you need a book to save your progress at the various save points because without it, you cannot save your game. Why even do this? I mean yes, you could find the book just one screen south of your starting point, which makes this even more of a waste of time. Not to mention a waste of an item slot for something else, but I digress. Oh, and by the way, all these side items can be found at various points in the various overworlds, which means exploring the dungeons serve little purpose outside of finding a new piece of equipment, the boss key to unlock the boss door, and obviously the boss itself. Anything else is just extra gimmicks that you could probably already acquire through item drops from enemies or purchase through vendors in the overworld. Ultimately, it's the limited scope that neuters Neutopia's replay value. The gameplay is fairly solid for what is essentially copied homework, it controls well enough, and I do like that they spiced up the dungeons with some extra traps for flavor as well as the idea of traversing different worlds, but it never quite matches the sense of grand adventure you get from Zelda, which was more open to endless possibilities and endless potential to tackle the game however you deem fit. With Neutopia though, the path is pretty much laid out for you and you have to follow it, and that's a bit lame. Neutopia is a very nice looking game though. Obviously a rather vibrant and colorful game with some decently sized characters and boss monsters. The 4 overworlds you travel through are suitably nice looking, and the dungeons are suitably samey looking, with only color changes to differentiate them. Now one thing I noticed that I actually kinda like is that screen transitions are fairly smooth throughout. It's a minor thing to highlight, but Zelda's screen transitions always bothered me in how janky they seemed, except for one instance in the dungeons from side to side where it's nice and smooth. Neutopia, however, doesn't have that issue, and I appreciate that little fix in an otherwise pleasant looking game. Now on the other hand, Neutopia's soundtrack is, meh. I'm sure there's a few TurboGrafx PC engine lifers that'll cry foul about how dare you not recognize this musical masterpiece for its greatness or some stupid thing like that, but honestly, the tunes do nothing for me, they're just there. Nothing terrible or boring, and a couple tracks are actually highly energetic, but on the other hand are just kinda whatever, I don't know, I've heard better. And the sound effects are also kind of meh, whatever. Sorry. Overall, despite being a somewhat lesser derivative of a more popular game on another platform, I found Neutopia to be a pretty good little adventure game of sorts, with its only real weakness being not quite as open-ended as its inspiration, which again limits the replay value. It's a game that's pretty much one and done before you move on to something else, but at least you'll have a fun time with it so long as your expectations are somewhat tempered.